Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller movie named Horror Stories from the Mountains, Part 1 and Part 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The first story begins with a middle-aged couple spending their leisure time strolling through the mountains, exercising while breathing in the fresh air. However, the woman's stamina isn't on par with the man's. After walking for a while, she can't go on. She tries to call out to her husband to stop for a rest, but it's as if he can't hear her, simply humming a song as he continues on. His nonchalant attitude infuriates her, but she doesn't dare to fall behind. Setting aside the dangers of the remote wilderness, the amulet she's carrying tells you she's a very cautious person. Fortunately, the man finally notices that something is wrong with his beloved wife. A caring gesture and a few words of concern instantly warmed the woman's heart, making her forget all her previous frustrations. They sit down to rest on a nearby bench. The woman complains that her lack of exercise is holding them back, but the man comforts her using his juicy tongue, saying they'll be fine if they just start coming out more often. He then thoughtfully hands her a cup of water. Throughout this, the woman keeps rubbing her leg and looking at her stinky foot, which prompts the man to immediately crouch down and check, asking with concern if her shoes are uncomfortable. This series of actions once again warms the woman's heart, and she remarks that she really should have started hiking with him sooner. After a short break, they continue their journey. Along the way, they encounter another couple who is also hiking. The man greets them from a distance. After the couple has walked away, the man explains to his wife why he did that. He says it's a habit they picked up from climbing high-altitude mountains. He explains that such a seemingly ordinary greeting can serve a very important purpose. Why is that? The man continues, explaining that many people lose their lives on those high-altitude mountains, but they often don't seem to know that they're dead. This is where the importance of a greeting comes in. The living will respond, but the dead will not. So, when they encounter someone who doesn't respond, they need to be prepared to run for it. After he says this, the woman falls silent, likely frightened by the story. Seeing her reaction, the man adds that he was just joking. Then, the man suddenly remembers that he used to come here often, so he's somewhat familiar with the area. He says that based on the time of year, a certain something should be in full bloom, and he wants to take his wife to see it. He tells her that it's incredibly beautiful and that very few people can find it. Before the woman can refuse, he's already leading her away. However, when they arrive at the fork in the road leading there, they stop. A sign has appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, which reads, "Danger ahead, do not enter." Seeing this, the woman hesitates, feeling a bit scared, but with the beautiful sight just ahead, the man is truly reluctant to give up, and so the woman follows him. Interestingly, as the two venture deeper, the sky seems to instantly grow a little darker. Soon they see a person up ahead, dressed in a white coat and a white hat. The man gets a bit excited upon seeing her, saying they're almost at their destination. The wife, however, feels the opposite. She clutches her amulet tightly, her intuition telling her something is off about this woman. Sure enough, as they get closer, the man greets her, but she ignores him, walking right past them. This annoys the man, and despite his wife's pleas not to look back, he doesn't listen and turns around. To his surprise, he discovers the woman has vanished. Before he can process this, the woman reappears, walking towards them from the path ahead. This time, the man doesn't dare to greet her. As she passes by him, he sees a ligature mark on her neck. This sight terrifies the man, but he still wants to look again. His wife desperately begs him not to turn back, but it's no use. He wants another look. When he does, he sees the woman's hat fall off as she mumbles something in his ear. Then their eyes meet, and his mind goes blank. In the next instant, the woman is gone. The couple tries to leave the area quickly, but they haven't gone far before they see the woman once again walking towards them from up ahead. At this point, they are paralyzed with fear. The entire forest begins to echo with a strange sound. It was like the sound of a heavy object tied to a rope, swinging back and forth from a tree. And then there was nothing. It seems the couple will never be able to leave, and that's where the story ends. So the moral of the story is, if you want to live a long life, you've got to listen to your wife. The second story begins with 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, who are driving up a mountain at night for fun. On the way, they pass through a tunnel, but nothing strange happens. After exiting the tunnel, they stop their car by a vending machine on the side of the road. They each grab a drink and chat about trivial topics. Soon after, they get back in the car and continue to their destination, the mountain summit. The three of them stand by the guardrail at the top, admiring the beautiful night view while reminiscing about their childhoods. One man named Keihei mentions that when he was little, his grandfather used to bring him here and would always tell him stories about ghost lights. His grandfather said that when he was a boy, whenever someone in the village died, you would definitely see a spirit emerge from this spot. And on a specific day, many spirits would return from here. Hearing this, Keita, another man who is standing nearby, chimes in that his grandmother told him the same story. The woman then suddenly asks if they might be able to see them today. The two men are taken aback. Why would this woman want to see ghost lights? But as it turns out, tonight is that specific day. After this, everyone falls silent. After a long while, they prepare to leave. But then Keita's phone suddenly rings. He picks it up and quickly steps aside to answer. Seeing this, Keihei teases him, asking if it's his girlfriend. After Keita walks away, Keihei suddenly asks the woman about Kumi, a mutual friend of theirs. He says Kumi is sick and that when he heard about it, he went to the hospital to see her. It's quite serious and it seems she doesn't have much time left. After hearing this, the woman is silent for a moment before changing the subject. Just then, Keihei confesses to the woman, telling her he has always liked her. The reason he never said anything was because someone had told him he wasn't good enough for her. After his confession, the two fall silent again. Coincidentally, Keita returns after finishing his call. Keita says his mom wants him to come home right away. As Keihei goes to get the car, Keita tells the woman that he's getting married. The woman is very surprised to hear this. Keita is even more surprised, saying he had told Kumi about it before, so he assumed they all knew. Then, the two of them stop talking. The ride back is quiet. The three of them are lost in their own thoughts and don't know what to say, so they turn on the radio. At first, it's fine, broadcasting traffic news and such, but as the car enters the tunnel, something terrifying happens. The woman faintly hears a strange voice coming from the radio. She asks the two men if they hear anything. Confused, they reply that they don't. The car continues driving and the voice becomes clearer and clearer. Finally, the woman recognizes it. It's Kumi's voice, saying she won't forgive her. Hearing this, the woman breaks down, desperately covering her ears and mumbling that it wasn't her. Her actions startle the two men. They stop the car inside the tunnel and try to calm her down, telling her to take a deep breath. But the woman looks ahead of the car and becomes even more terrified, screaming for it to stay away. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps comes from the roof of the car. The two men, frightened, get out to check, and there they see footprints on the roof. In an instant, both men collapse to the ground in fear, and the story ends there. So what was this story really about? It seems the woman did something to Kumi, and Kumi's illness seems connected to her. The third story begins with a salaryman named Kenichi who falls in love with nature after he's overwhelmed by work-related stress. And because of that same stress, Kenichi decided to immerse himself completely in it. This time, he chose a mountain area he had never visited before. The trees here were tall and the scenery was pleasant. According to a guide he read, after crossing through the forest, he would reach a secluded paradise. Kenichi was full of anticipation and hurried along, following his navigation. In his haste, however, he failed to notice that the path was originally blocked by a hemp rope tied with strips of white cloth. In Japan, it's well known that this is a type of spiritual barrier used to ward off evil. Wherever you find one of these, there are bound to be ghosts. Crossing the barrier, passing over a red bridge and venturing a little deeper, Kenichi arrived at his destination. There was a waterfall with a small pond beneath it, and the scenery was indeed beautiful. Kenichi fell in love with the place at first sight. He immediately set up his camp. By the time he was finally done, the sky had already grown dark. Kenichi was preparing to make himself something to eat when he heard strange, inexplicable sounds around him. At the time, he just glanced around and didn't pay much attention, thinking it was probably the wind. After eating, Kenichi went into his tent, ready for a good night's sleep. However, it was perhaps too dark, so Kenichi, who had already lain down, got up and went outside to find his oil lamp. He turned on the lamp and placed it next to the tent, thinking the dim light would help him sleep well. But just as he set it down, he discovered something. Looking closely, he saw what appeared to be some kind of bone. Digging further, he unearthed human bones. This terrified Kenichi. He quickly turned off the lamp, crawled into his tent, and tried to sleep. Though terrified and horrified, he had to force himself to fall asleep. He thought that if he could just make it until morning, he would leave immediately. With this thought, Kenichi drifted off to sleep. An unknown amount of time passed. The sky was still dark when the sound of someone patting his tent woke Kenichi up. After waking, he wanted to go outside and check, but he was too afraid. A short while later, he heard footsteps approaching from a distance. As the footsteps drew near, Kenichi heard the person's groans, and then their hand began to scratch at his tent. Kenichi was petrified by this. He covered his waxy ears tightly and shut his peeping eyes, trying not to listen or look. But it was useless because the thing came right in. Kenichi was scared to death, and I mean literally, and that's where the story ends. The fourth story begins on a drizzly, rainy day when a group of observers entered the forest, a place that originally belonged to wild birds. They wore raincoats and carried cameras ready to take pictures. However, the rain was particularly heavy that day, so the guide apologized to the tourists, explaining that some birds might not appear in such weather, but regardless, they would do their best to serve everyone present. Just then, a woman wandered into the area. She walked towards the mountain, paying no mind to the rain hitting her face. Judging by her dazed expression, she seemed to have suffered some kind of major blow. Another guide, a young man, noticed her and called out to her. The young guide's barrage of questions went unanswered. Unfazed, he continued to ask the woman if this was her first time here, mentioning that the area was very dangerous without a guide. The young guide's words were pointed. He then glanced to the side where there was a no suicide sign. Seeing this, the woman's flat face finally showed an expression. She told the young guide she wasn't there to end her life. The young guide was relieved, saying that as long as that wasn't the case, everything was fine. He then handed the woman a raincoat, explaining that her dazed state while walking in the rain was a bit strange. He said that if she didn't mind, she could join their group for the rest of the tour, free of charge, of course. The woman hesitated for a moment, then took the raincoat, clearly accepting his offer. Afterward, the group headed into the forest. The guide explained things as he led the tourists in taking photos. Although they photographed fewer birds due to the rain, the forest in the rain was quite beautiful in its own right. The woman silently followed at the back of the group, with the young guide by her side, perhaps worried she might suddenly wander off to commit suicide. Later, the young guide stayed with the woman exclusively. He not only taught her how to spot birds, but also how to use binoculars. When the woman finally saw a bird through the binoculars, she was overjoyed, a completely different person from when she first arrived. Seeing this, the man finally felt at ease. Time quickly passed to noon, and the group sat on a long bench in the forest to rest. The woman was just about to thank the young guide when her phone suddenly rang. She took out her phone, glanced at it, but didn't answer. The man didn't press the issue and instead started telling her about various birds. This unique way of comforting her eased her mind considerably. After the lunch break, they continued deeper into the forest. This time, the guide led them to a grand viewpoint. He said that from here, they could see a legendary spirit bird, which was very beautiful. He explained that this bird could mimic the calls of other birds and was usually very difficult to find. Given the poor weather today, it was possible they might not see it. Basically, it was up to fate. The guide continued to describe the bird's appearance, saying its wings were black and white, but its body was blue. Just then, the woman suddenly heard a particularly piercing sound. As the sound rang out, the guide suddenly shouted that the spirit bird had appeared right in front of them. Everyone looked in the direction the guide was pointing. A moment later, everyone exclaimed in delight that they could see it. The woman also looked through her binoculars in that direction. She did indeed see a ball of white mist, but strangely, it was only visible through the binoculars. The first time, she couldn't see it clearly. She took a second look, and this time she realized it wasn't a bird at all, but a person hanging from a tree. The woman was terrified. The young guide noticed and walked over, asking if she had seen it. He told her that this tree was known as the hanging tree during the Edo period. Therefore, no matter what you see on this tree, you can never capture it in a photo. The young guide's words were tinged with regret. He then called to the main guide, preparing to leave. After they left, the woman didn't move. Instead, she raised her binoculars again and looked towards the tree. This time, she tried to adjust the binoculars to get a farther, clearer view, and then she saw the woman's bloody face. But she was suddenly stopped by the young guide. The woman clearly hadn't recovered from the shock. Then her phone rang again. She looked at the number, answered, and said she would be home tonight. Despite her words, the scene then changes, and there is now another person hanging from that tree. A closer look at the face reveals it's the woman. This scene is then captured in a photograph by the young guide, and the story ends. So, considering the young guide's earlier regret about not being able to photograph it, the death might be caused by a murder. The fifth story begins in a game of outdoor real-life CS, where Kaneda's superb marksmanship had taken out many opponents. Victory was in sight, but then a cavalryman suddenly appeared, and in a moment of carelessness, Kaneda was eliminated. Kaneda was very frustrated, but had to follow the game's rules and exit the field. But then, something strange happened. As Kaneda walked through the woods, he got lost. He couldn't find his way back, and in a daze, thought he saw something in the forest. At the time, Kaneda didn't think much of it, figuring he couldn't possibly run into a ghost in broad daylight. He continued walking along the path, but not only did he not get out, he discovered an abandoned tunnel. The gate was locked and blocked with several yellow "Do Not Enter" caution tapes. Kaneda curiously inspected it from outside the bars for a moment, and seeing the gate was locked, prepared to leave. But then something even stranger happened. The lock fell off by itself, and the gate opened. As Kaneda was debating whether to go inside, a man suddenly appeared behind him. It was a teammate informing him that the game was over. Hearing that his team had won, Kaneda was delighted and left with his teammate. This time he quickly found the path and returned to the camp smoothly. At the camp, he noticed an older player using a brand new model of gun. The man really liked it, and the older player, seeing his interest, let him borrow it. Soon, the second match began. Wielding the new gun, the man was a force to be reckoned with, quickly taking out one opponent. But as he prepared to eliminate a second opponent, something went wrong. There seemed to be something behind this person. Curious, the man lowered his gun and looked in that direction, but there was nothing there. But when he raised the gun and looked through the scope again, the figure was right on his opponent's back. The man tried to warn him, but Yoshikawa didn't hear. So he could only watch in horror as the monster attacked Yoshikawa, and the monster noticed him too. The man screamed in terror, and his chicken cries attracted everyone's attention. When the others went to look for Yoshikawa, they found that he had vanished without any trace. Everyone asked the man if he had any other clues, and then the man remembered the tunnel. He led the group there. They opened the gate and went inside. Strangely, though separated only by an iron gate, the air inside was exceptionally cold, making everyone who entered shiver their smelly butts inexplicably. They called out a few times with no response and decided to go deeper. Soon they reached the other end of the tunnel, where there was another iron gate. Opening it and walking forward, they found a cave, a dark cave that looked inexplicably creepy. There were railings and a plaque at the cave's entrance, clearly meant to warn anyone passing by to stay away. The three of them slowly approached, calling Yoshikawa's name, trying to ask if he was there. But after a few calls with no reply, they realized Yoshikawa was not there. They instinctively backed away, preparing to leave, but the man didn't want to give up. He climbed over the railing and continued to peer into the cave entrance. As he did, he was horrified to discover that hidden among the rubble at the cave's edge was something resembling a human face. Terrified, the man decisively gave up the search for Yoshikawa and left with the other two. And that's where the story ends. So was that face what Yoshikawa had become? In Japanese urban legends, the mountains are home to all sorts of spirits and monsters. Did the unlucky Yoshikawa just happen to run into one? No one knows, only that Yoshikawa was missing from that day forward. The sixth story begins with one of the so-called power spots found all over Japan. In reality, it's just a large tree root that's enshrined. Hana and her friend came here because of its reputation, but after one look, they lost interest. They had originally planned to document it for a weekly publication, but now it seemed that was out of the question. Yet it was a bit too early to leave. As they thought about where they should go next, Hana came up with an idea. Why not go see the lying down marks? They were on the mountain just ahead. The friend saw that it wasn't far from their current location, so she agreed to go with Hana to see this place called the Lying Down Marks. This part of the mountain was quite desolate, with no signs or marked trails. The two of them walked in the forest for a very long time, and just as they were about to give up, they finally saw the Lying Down Marks. To put it bluntly, they were just two stone figures laid on their backs. It's hard to understand why the locals were so afraid of them. Even Hana was a little disappointed. The friend suggested they walk a bit further up the mountain to see if they could find anything more interesting. Hana agreed, and the two continued up the mountain. But after walking for just a short distance, they realized something was wrong. They seemed to have returned to the Lying Down Marks. Puzzled, they continued up the mountain, and not surprisingly, they circled right back to the same spot. This happened 3 or 4 times. The two finally started to feel uneasy and decided to head down the mountain and go home. But then, something even more terrifying happened. They couldn't get down the mountain either. No matter which way they walked, they just kept circling around the Lying Down Marks. Now they finally understood why the locals were afraid of the Lying Down Marks. They didn't know what to do. The friend thought for a moment, took the video camera, and had Hana describe their current predicament to the camera. But as she was speaking, Hana noticed someone approaching. A patrolman told them to walk straight and then turn right to get down the mountain. Following the patrolman's directions, the two of them ran in the direction he pointed. But after running for a while, it dawned on them. What would a patrolman be doing deep in these mountains? They quickly rewound the video to check. To their horror, they saw that the patrolman genuinely had no ears, and his unbrushed teeth were exceptionally terrifying. And that's where the story ends. As for whether the two young women ever made it out, the film gives no clear message, but seeing the patrolman's unbrushed teeth, it's highly likely they didn't. The seventh story begins with a legend saying that every night at 3 a.m., supernatural events occur at this shrine, and so 4 restless young people decided to go on an adventure here. But when they arrived at the foot of the mountain where the shrine was located, the 2 young women looked at the dark and deep flight of stairs and immediately had second thoughts, deciding not to go up. Seeing this, the men casually tossed the car keys to them, mockingly saying that if they were scared, they could wait in the car, and they would all leave together when they got back. But after hearing this and looking at the car, the 2 women changed their minds. They decided it was better to go up with the men. At least if something happened, they would have the men to protect them. But if they waited by the car and something happened, screaming would be useless. Afterwards, the 4 of them cautiously made their way up the mountain. By this time, it was already 2:40 a.m., meaning there were only 20 minutes left until the supposed paranormal event. Thinking of this, their hearts pounded with a thrilling excitement. Upon reaching the shrine, the group wandered around for a bit. When the time finally came to 3 a.m., they squatted in the center of the shrine, waiting for the supernatural event to happen. But after waiting for a long time, there were no strange noises. Suddenly, a prank boy lit up his own face with a flashlight. He started by acting mysterious and muttering to himself for a while. Just as he had everyone on edge and terrified, he told them that he wasn't an ordinary person. He could hear the whispers of ghosts. He said that many spirits had already gathered around them, and these spirits had told him their story. The story was about a woman who gave birth in a hospital, but the baby was taken by the father, who had a nurse abandon it here. Whether the father and the nurse were having an affair, the ghost didn't say, only that the man disposed of the child here. This act was witnessed by the mother, who had followed them. Unable to bear the grief, the mother committed suicide. It was a melodramatic and baffling story, but it terrified the group. The prank boy said that the spirits were filled with rage and had become vengeful ghosts lingering in this place. The group trembled with fear and farts, but suddenly the sound of a camera shutter cut through their terror. At that moment, even the slowest of them realized the story was fake. It was a tale concocted by the 2 men to scare the women. Seeing their plan succeed, the prank boy was very pleased. However, they noticed that one of the women was still terrified. They tried to get her to stand up, telling her it was just a joke they were playing on her, but the woman didn't move, saying she could feel that there was genuinely something near them right now. The prank boy didn't believe her, thinking she was just using his own trick against him. He decided to use his camera to expose her lie. There's a belief that cameras can capture things the human eye cannot see. So the prank boy aimed the camera at the woman and pressed the shutter. In the flash of the camera, it seemed like something really did appear, but it was too fast for anyone to see clearly. The prank boy prepared to try again. He struck a pose, swallowed hard, and pressed the shutter. This time, they really saw it. The group fled in a panic, so scared they even left the camera behind, and that's where the story ends. The 8th story begins with a man who was hiking in the mountains, trekking over hills and wading through streams, panting for breath. The path was very difficult, and the man struggled to make his way. As he stopped in the middle of the path for a short break, he heard the sound of a bell. He turned to look, but there was nothing there. The man paid it no mind and continued walking. But after just a few more steps, the bell sound came again. The man turned around again, and still there was nothing. But just as he turned back, a man in red walked past him. The hiker greeted him, but received no reply. The man looked at him with curiosity, but didn't dwell on it, simply following behind him, listening to the bell. But this person walked very fast, and soon the hiker was left far behind. After walking for a long time, the man finally arrived at a rest stop in the mountains. The owner there said a typhoon might be coming and suggested the man stay the night. As the hiker was looking for a place to pitch his tent, he saw the red-clad man's backpack. This made him realize that the man had also stopped here. While resting, the hiker found a journal, possibly left by a previous traveler. Curious, he opened it and saw that the traveler had written about strange noises at night. The noise kept him awake and made him very agitated, causing him to regret camping there. The man saw that the notebook mentioned the sound was coming from the restroom. On the pretext of needing to relieve himself, he went to the restroom to check it out. There were 2 stalls. One was full of excrement, and the other was boarded up. He didn't know why. Maybe it was to stop people from stealing the smelly turds. The man wasn't sure if the strange sound was coming from here. He left and went back. Upon returning, he saw the lights go out in a room. He figured the man in red must have gone to bed so early. But then another man in red walked past him, which was very strange and made the hiker freeze for a moment. That evening, while the man was eating dinner, he heard a strange noise. Remembering the contents of the notebook, he realized this was the sound described in it. To figure out what was happening, he went to investigate, and he saw that in the boarded-up latrine, something seemed to be ramming against the door. The man wondered if a thief was caught in the act. He quickly returned. He wanted to to see how the notebook described this, but there was no further description, only a URL. The signal here wasn't great, so the man had to find a spot with a signal to access the website. There, he found information about the strange sound. It turned out it wasn't a thief, but a former caretaker of the place who had committed suicide in that latrine for some unknown reason. The scene at the time was very bloody, a mix of blood and excrement. Just as the man read this, he heard the sound of a bell. Immediately after, the banging from the restroom stall started again. The sudden noise startled the man, and he instinctively shone his flashlight in that direction. He saw that the force of the banging was so great that it had knocked off the wooden planks nailed to the door. Then, thick, dark red blood began to flow out from under it. Seeing this, the man couldn't hold it in any longer and started screaming. Finally, the door was knocked open and a person drenched in bright red emerged. And then, there was nothing. The man had fainted from fright. When he woke up, it was the next day. Without so much as a goodbye, the man immediately left. The owner of the rest stop saw this but didn't ask any questions because he understood everything. He calmly went to the restroom and boarded it up again, and that's where the story ends. The 9th story begins with Haru and her classmates walking this route every day after school, chatting about everything from TV shows to handsome boys. Just then, Yasuo rode by on his Tesla bike. Yasuo was considered handsome and happened to live near Haru's house, so her classmates were all very envious. But Haru seemed unfazed, perhaps immune to Yasuo's good looks and muscles. Later, they came to a fork in the road and parted ways to go to their respective homes. Haru rode her bike towards her house. Along the way, she saw Yasuo's bicycle, but not Yasuo himself. She felt a strange sense of worry and stopped to check. A moment later, there was a noise from the woods, and Yasuo emerged. Haru breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing Haru, Yasuo explained that his grandmother had asked him to help pick mushrooms. After that, he rode off down a small side path. As for Haru, she just watched but didn't dare to follow. This path was infamous, so famous that everyone in the vicinity knew about it. Legend said a dog spirit lived there and ate people who passed by, but the truth was that a murderer had once hidden there. The elders of that time made up the story to protect their children from harm. As time went on, the lie became more and more exaggerated, eventually turning into a legend about a dog spirit or a ghost. The next evening, as Haru was passing by the same spot again, her bicycle chain suddenly came off. Haru immediately called her mom, hoping she could drive over and pick her up, but she was refused. The reason being she had to wait for her dad to get home. Haru was worried that if she pushed her bike home, she would miss her 7 p.m. Daniel CCTV show, which meant she would have nothing to talk about with her friends the next day. She asked her mother to help record the show, but was refused again. The reason was that her mom didn't know how. What's more, her mom told her to take the shortcut home, saying that way she wouldn't miss her show. But that was the path with the legendary dog spirit. Haru was terrified, but her mom just said that the dog spirit story was fake, and that the murderer from back then had been caught long ago, so she should be fine. There was no other choice. Seeing the sky grow darker and darker, Haru reluctantly entered the path. Perhaps due to her fear, the moment she stepped onto the path, Haru felt it was unusually dark and cold, so she proceeded with extreme caution. But even so, she constantly felt a pair of eyes watching her from the woods, and at some point Haru's nose started to bleed. Haru wiped it with a tissue and quickened her pace, but in the next moment, she seemed to bump into something and fell. Haru was terrified, but when she looked up, she saw it was Yasuo, who hadn't gone home yet. Yasuo helped Haru up, and the two left together, and that's where the story ends. So it seems that there isn't really a dog spirit on this path, but Yasuo who's just a lovesick puppy waiting for her. The 10th story begins with a climber pushing himself to the mountain's midpoint on the first day of his climb. By then, he was panting heavily and could clearly feel the thinness of the air. That night, the climber set up camp right where he was. The temperature at night was very low, cold, and the wind was strong. But the climber didn't mind because he was only 700 meters from the summit. He had been preparing for this summit attempt for 3 years and hoped he would finally succeed this time. And so, on the second day, the climber adapted to the environment, feeling much more relaxed than when he had first arrived. He contentedly ate the rice he had brought from Japan, thinking he needed to eat well to have the strength to reach the summit. That night, the climber's morning confidence was gone, replaced by a sense of uncertainty. He spoke to his camera again and again, telling himself to persevere, to believe that he could definitely reach the summit this time. Because of his obsession with reaching the summit, he had already caused trouble for many people along the way. It was only because of their help that he had made it this far, so he told himself he would not give up under any circumstances. circumstances. Then, on the third day, true to his word, the climber persevered and was on the verge of reaching the summit. He was overjoyed and wanted to thank all the people who had helped him. But that night, the climber was once again filled with uncertainty. He was exhausted, incredibly tired. He told the camera that he had failed. He said that when he set out, something suddenly went wrong with his body. After walking just 300 meters, his legs wouldn't move. This was not a good sign, so he didn't push on. If he misjudged the situation, he could die on the mountain. So even with the summit right in front of him, he retreated. He was extremely frustrated and disheartened, feeling that his abilities were still not up to the task. On the fourth day, the climber continued his ascent, but failed again. Late that night, he turned on the camera again. He said he heard a strange noise right near his tent. He was terrified, but still turned off the camera. On the morning of the fifth day, the climber hadn't slept at all. His eyes were dark and sunken, his expression was haggard, and he stated with a look of terror that he was being watched. He didn't know what that thing wanted to do to him. At this moment, the climber was desperate, angry, and helpless. He screamed in a chicken voice and roared like a goose, cursing outside his tent, as if trying to use this display to mask his inner fear and helplessness. That night, the climber felt an incredible itching all over his body, but no amount of scratching could relieve it. He was terrified, crying and shouting in despair, his mental state gradually becoming abnormal. Late that night, the climber was eating something. He chewed slowly as he turned around, revealing that he was chewing on his own arm. After a scene change, the climber is seen muttering something incoherently. Then a loud roaring sound comes from outside the tent, and the inside of the tent shakes violently. The climber's face has become swollen and round. He smiles bizarrely, his eyes filled with terror, the same as binge-watching Daniel CC horror movies.